The words were not delivered with the heat of anger, but with the cold, sterile precision of a surgeon making an incision. "We just don't want you there, Mom." "My daughter," my Nancy said. She said it while we were standing in the living room of the Cincinnati house I had shared with her father for 40 years, the room where I had rocked her to sleep as a baby. Her fiancé, Tyler, a man whose ambition I had always found more chilling than charming, stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that felt like a guard taking his position. They were talking about her wedding, the wedding I had been dreaming of since she was a little girl, and they were telling me, my only child and the man she was about to marry, that my presence was not requested, that it was not wanted. In that single brutal moment, the world I had known, the identity I had worn for 71 years, that of a wife and a mother, crumbled into dust. They thought my grief over losing my husband, Frank, had made me weak. They thought my quiet compliance in the face of their slow, creeping takeover of my home was a sign of senility. They saw me as a piece of old furniture, a relic from a bygone era that would clash with the clean, modern aesthetic of their new life. They didn't know that what they saw as weakness was just the quiet gathering of a storm. They didn't know that while they were picking out floral arrangements and tasting cakes, I would be meeting with a lawyer, making my own arrangements, and preparing a wedding gift they would never forget. They told me they didn't want me at their celebration. They were about to find out they were no longer wanted in my will, in my estate, or in my house. It all began, as these slow-motion devastations so often do, with an act of love, born from a place of profound loss. When Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack, the silence in our sprawling two-story house became a living entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Nancy and Tyler, married for just over a year, were living in a cramped downtown apartment, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the general injustice of their starter life. My heart ached for them, and for the echoing quiet of my own home. My idea, born from a mother's heart that still yearned to nurture and to fix, seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. I would have company, the sound of life, to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I offered it to them, my voice full of a hope that now tastes like ashes in my mouth. "Why don't you move in with me?" I'd said one Sunday over coffee. "There's so much space here. You could save money, get on your feet, and I wouldn't be so alone." Nancy's eyes had lit up, a flicker of something I mistook for daughterly affection, but now recognize as pure opportunism. "Oh, Mom," she'd cooed, "we couldn't possibly impose." Tyler, with his smooth, practiced charm, had sealed the deal. "Margaret, you're a saint. We'll take such good care of you. You've done so much for us. Now it's our turn to look after you." I swallowed their promises like a starving woman. I believed them because I needed to. I needed the noise, the life, the feeling of being a mother again. I helped them move their boxes in, clearing out Frank's old office to make space for their things. I didn't realize I was not just making room for their furniture. I was beginning the slow, painful process of my own erasure. I was a willing participant in the dismantling of my own life, naively believing I was building a new one for us all. The colonization of my home began subtly, with 1,000 small cuts to my identity, each one disguised as an improvement. The first thing to go was Frank's recliner, the worn leather chair where he had read the paper every morning for 30 years. "It's just so bulky and dated, Mom," Nancy had said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that was more insulting than outright disdain. "We found a much more modern piece that will really open up the living room." The modern piece was a cold, angular sofa that was impossible to get comfortable on. I didn't say anything. I watched the delivery men haul away Frank's chair, a piece of my heart going with it. Next, it was the wall, the family photos that lined the hallway, generations of memories. From my wedding day to Nancy's first steps were taken down one by one. We're going for a more minimalist aesthetic, Tyler explained, as he replaced a cherished photo of Frank and me with a generic, mass-produced print of a fern. My history was being curated out of existence, deemed too cluttered for their new, streamlined life. My kitchen, once my undisputed domain, became a battleground. The recipes I had perfected over a lifetime, the dishes Nancy had begged for as a child, were now met with polite disgust. My meatloaf was too heavy, my fried chicken was too greasy. They embarked on a series of trendy, expensive diets, filling my refrigerator with strange green juices and foods I couldn't pronounce. The comforting aromas of my home were replaced by the smell of steamed kale and simmering resentment. I tried to push back, to hold my ground on the small things. "I like my curtains, Nancy," I'd say softly. "They were a gift from your grandmother." "I know, Mom. And they're lovely," she would reply, her tone making it clear they were anything but they just don't go with the new color palette. "We have to think about the overall look of the house." "The house, not my house. The house." The language was shifting, and with it the balance of power. Every suggestion I made was met with a patient, weary sigh. Every preference I expressed was treated as a stubborn refusal to get with the time. They were experts at making me feel like the difficult one, the one who was stuck in the past, the one who was preventing our new family from gelling. I was being gaslit in my own living room, made to feel unreasonable for wanting to see my own life reflected in the home I had spent my life creating. The injustice of it was a constant, low-grade fever. I would retreat to my bedroom, the last bastion of my former life, and listen to the sounds of them rearranging my world, without my consent. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself this was the compromise required to have family around, but the loneliness I had so desperately tried to escape was creeping back in, and this new version was far more insidious. It was the loneliness of being invisible, of being a ghost in the vibrant, modern home my house was becoming. The assault on my emotional space was quickly followed by a strategic and devastating takeover of my financial independence. It was a masterclass in manipulation, performed with the loving concern of devoted children. They sat me down at the new glass dining table, the one that always had smudges on it, and presented a stack of my own bills with grave expressions. "Mom, we were just going through these, and we're worried," Tyler began, his voice a perfect symphony of sincerity and concern. "You have so much to keep track of. The mortgage, the utilities, your insurance. It's a lot for one person to handle." Nancy placed her hand on my arm, her touch cool and proprietary. "We just want to make life easier for you," she said. "What if we consolidated everything? We could open a joint account, and we can manage all the household payments from there. Your pension can be direct deposited, and you'll never have to worry about missing a due date again." My heart sank. Frank had set me up so carefully, ensuring I would be independent and secure for the rest of my days. My finances were my last vestige of my autonomy, the one part of my life they hadn't yet touched. "I'm perfectly capable of paying my own bills," I said, a defensive edge to my voice that I instantly regretted. "Oh, we know you are, Margaret," Tyler soothed, his tone placating. "This isn't about you not being capable, it's about us taking on some of the burden. It's what families do. We want to take care of you." They used my love for them, my desire for a harmonious family, as a lever to pry open my life. To refuse their help would be to accuse them of something nefarious, to admit that I didn't trust them. It would shatter the fragile peace. And so, worn down and wanting to believe in the best version of my daughter, I agreed. The next day at the bank, Tyler did all the talking. He charmed the teller with a story about helping his aging mother with her estate planning. I signed the forms, my hand unsteady, adding both their names to my checking and savings accounts. And just like that, they had the keys to the kingdom. For the first month, they were meticulous. The bills were paid on time, But then the bank statements started to tell a different story. There were charges from expensive downtown restaurants, online shopping sprees for clothes in Nancy's size, a weekend getaway to a spa in Chicago that I certainly wasn't invited on. The withdrawals were disguised as household expenses or family needs, but I wasn't a fool. I knew my money was funding their increasingly lavish lifestyle. I tried to confront them, my voice shaking as I held up a statement showing a withdrawal of several $1,000s for home improvements. It had paid for the giant wall-mounted television they now watched every night. "Tyler, what is this?" I asked. "We didn't discuss this. It's an investment in the property, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "It increases the value for all of us." The audacity of it left me speechless. My savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved, was being used to improve a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a person, I was I was the silent, involuntary financier of a life from which I was being systematically excluded. I was paying for the very decor that was erasing me, funding the very lifestyle that was marginalizing me. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy stone of resentment that I was forced to carry in silence. My world, which had once been filled with friends, hobbies and community, had shrunk to the size of the chair in my bedroom. The isolation tactics that Nancy and Tyler had employed became more brazen, more cruel. They no longer bothered with flimsy excuses. They simply cut me off. The house phone, which I now realized they had set up to forward to Nancy's cell when they were out, rarely rang for me anymore. On the rare occasion a friend did manage to get through directly, Nancy would often hover nearby, making it impossible to have a private or honest conversation. My best friend, Monica, was the most persistent. She knew something was wrong. She started showing up at the house, unannounced, trying to bypass the gatekeepers. The first time she did it, Tyler answered the door. I was in the kitchen and heard his smooth, practiced voice. "Monica, so good to see you. I'm so sorry Margaret is right in the middle of a nap. She's been so exhausted lately." I was wide awake, holding a cup of tea, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run to the door and scream that I was a prisoner, but the shame held me in place. What would I even say? How could I explain that my own daughter was holding me captive? It sounded like the plot of a lurid television movie. Monica tried again a week later. This time, Nancy answered. Her approach was different, more insidious. "Oh, Monica, hi," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Mom's just having a bit of a confused day. Her memory, the doctor said it's best to keep her environment calm and not have too many visitors. It agitates her." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening in horror. She was painting me as a senile old woman, incompetent and fragile. It was a lie designed not only to keep Monica away, but also to plant a seed of doubt, to discredit me in case I ever did manage to cry for help. The lie was a masterpiece of cruelty. It simultaneously isolated me and destroyed my credibility in a single stroke. After that incident, Monica's visits stopped. I couldn't blame her. She was trying to respect what she believed were my medical needs, manipulated into compliance by my own child. The loneliness became a physical ache, a constant companion. I had invited my family in to fill the silence left by Frank, but they had replaced it with a different kind of silence, a cold, menacing quiet, filled with unspoken threats and the constant hum of their disregard for me. I was completely at their mercy, and they showed none. My days fell into a bleak, monotonous routine. I would stay in my room until I heard them leave for the day, then creep out to the kitchen to make myself some toast and tea. I would spend the day tidying up the house, washing their dirty dishes, left in the sink, folding their laundry left in the dryer. I did it partly out of a lifetime of habit, and partly out of a desperate, pathetic need to feel useful, to somehow earn my keep in the home that was supposed to be mine. They treated me like an unpaid, invisible maid. They would walk past me without a word of greeting. They would discuss their plans for the weekend in front of me, as if I wasn't there. I was no longer Margaret, their mother. I was a fixture, a piece of furniture that occasionally moved and breathed. The injustice was a slow burning fire in my gut. I had given them everything, my home, my financial security, my love. In return, they had stripped me of my friends,
my dignity and my identity. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own creation, haunted by the ghost of the loving daughter I thought I had raised, wasn't wanted, and realized she was the only one whose wants truly mattered. It is a story about the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you have forgotten it. I am not a victim, I am a survivor, and as I watch the morning light spill across my garden, I am filled with a profound and lasting peace. They didn't want me at their wedding, but in the end, I was the one who was truly, finally gloriously free to celebrate.
The announcement of Nancy's wedding, which should have been a moment of joy, landed in the tense atmosphere of our home, like a lit match in a gas-filled room. I found out not from my daughter, but from an effusive post she made on social media, complete with a picture of a large, ostentatious diamond ring that I had a sinking feeling my money had paid for. I said yes. The caption read, followed by a string of emojis and a tag for Tyler. There was no mention of me. No, I can't wait to tell my mom. The omission was a deliberate public slight. I tried to feel happy for her. I truly did. A part of me, the mother part that refused to die, wanted to celebrate this milestone. I imagined helping her choose a dress, tasting cakes, addressing invitations. I pictured us having a moment, a real mother-daughter moment, that might somehow bridge the growing chasm between us. But my attempts to participate were met with a wall of polite, impenetrable resistance. "Oh, Mom, you don't need to worry about that," Nancy would say when I asked about the venue. "We've got it covered." When I offered to help her shop for a dress, she smiled sweetly and said, "Thanks, but my friends are taking me. We're going to make a whole girls' weekend out of it in Chicago." I was being systematically excluded from every aspect of the planning. I was not a participant. I was a bystander, and a barely tolerated one at that. They would have whispered conversations about flower arrangements and seating charts, their voices dropping whenever I entered the room. They treated the wedding like a top-secret military operation, and I was the civilian without the necessary security clearance. The injustice of it was a constant bitter taste in my mouth. This was my only child's wedding, a day I had dreamed of since she was a little girl, playing dress-up in my old clothes, and I was being treated like a stranger, an outsider, who might contaminate their perfect, curated event. The breaking point, the moment of the final, unforgivable betrayal, came on a Sunday afternoon. I had gathered my courage and decided to confront them directly. "Nancy," I said, my voice shaking slightly as I stood in the doorway of the living room, where they were looking at color swatches. "I'd like to talk about the wedding. I feel like I'm being left out." Nancy looked up from a swatch of pale gray, her expression one of mild annoyance. "Mom, we're really busy right now," she said. "We're not leaving you out. There's just a lot to do." "I want to be involved," I insisted, my voice gaining a little strength. "I want to help. I want to feel like I'm a part of my own daughter's wedding." That's when Tyler stood up, his face a mask of condescending patience. He walked over to me and put his hands on my shoulders, a gesture that was meant to seem comforting, but felt like a restraint. "Margaret," he said, using my first name as he always did when he was about to deliver a blow, "we need to be honest with you. This is going to be a very specific kind of event. It's modern, it's for our friends, for people our age. We have a certain vision for it." "And I'm not a part of that vision?" I asked, the words catching in my throat. Nancy stood up then, her face cold and resolute. She was the one who delivered the final, fatal sentence. "Mom," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "we think it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the words. "What? It would just be awkward," Tyler chimed in, picking up the thread. "You'd be uncomfortable. You don't know anyone, and honestly, your presence would just change the whole vibe. So you're uninviting me," I whispered, my heart shattering. "We just don't want you there, Mom," Nancy said, the words a final, brutal confirmation. "It's our day, and we want it to be perfect. Perfect. A perfect day. A perfect life." A perfect picture that had no room for the old grieving, inconvenient woman who had given them everything. That was the moment the love died. That was the moment the mother in me was replaced by something else, something cold, something hard, and something utterly, unshakably resolved. They didn't want me at their wedding. Fine, I would give them a wedding gift. They would never forget. The silence in the house, after their declaration, was a living thing. It was thick with their smug satisfaction and my own cold, nascent rage. They thought they had won. They had successfully excised the final, inconvenient piece from their perfect life puzzle. They went about their wedding planning with a new, unburdened glee, leaving Caterer brochures on the kitchen counter and discussing honeymoon destinations as if I were a piece of furniture that couldn't hear. I retreated into myself, but it was a different kind of retreat now. It was not the withdrawal of a victim, it was the strategic silence of a general planning, a campaign. My grief, which had been a fog, had crystallized into a diamond-hard point of clarity. They had shown me exactly who they were. Now I was going to show them who I was. I waited, I watched, I listened. Their arrogance was my greatest ally. They believed I was defeated, a sad, senile old woman who had accepted her fate. They had no idea that in the quiet of my bedroom, I was assembling an arsenal. My first move was to reclaim my financial independence. I remembered Frank's old lawyer, a man named Mr. Abernathy, who had handled our will years ago. He was old now, semi-retired, but his mind was as sharp as a tack. I found his number in Frank's old address book, a relic from a time when loyalty and honor meant something. I used a payphone at a corner store, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. When Mr. Abernathy answered, his voice was a gravelly comfort. I told him everything, my voice low and steady. He listened without interruption, and when I was done, there was a long pause. "Margaret," he said finally, his voice thick with a quiet fury, "they have committed multiple crimes against you. This is not just a family squabble, this is financial exploitation of the elderly. And it is a felony." His words were a balm to my soul. I was not crazy, I was not bitter, I was a victim, and I had rights. With Mr. Abernathy's guidance, I began to act. We opened a new bank account at a different bank. We filed the paperwork to have my pension and Social Security checks redirected. And then, we executed the most critical move. As the sole original owner of the joint accounts, I signed the documents to have both Tyler and Nancy's names removed, freezing their access to the funds they had been so freely plundering. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait. The second part of my plan was the house itself. The deed, as I knew, was in my name, and mine alone. It was the one piece of my life they had not yet managed to seize. "We are not going to evict them," Mr. Abernathy had advised. "An eviction is messy, public, and can be delayed. We are going to do something much more elegant. We are going to sell the house." The audacity of it took my breath away. While they were inside, planning their perfect wedding in their home, I would be outside, quietly and legally liquidating the very ground beneath their feet. We hired a real estate agent, who was a master of discretion. He marketed the property as a pocket listing, showing it by appointment only to a select group of pre-qualified buyers. His cover story was brilliant. He presented himself to Tyler and Nancy as an appraiser from the city, sent to conduct a reassessment for property tax purposes. They, blinded by their own self-importance, bought it completely. They proudly gave him a tour, pointing out all the valuable improvements they had made with my money. They were unwittingly acting as sales agents for their own downfall. I waited, my days a tense mixture of hope and fear. I continued my performance as the docile, faded woman, while on the outside, my legal and real estate armies were mobilized. They thought they had banished me from their perfect day. They had no idea I was planning to crash their wedding in the most spectacular way imaginable. The final weeks leading up to the wedding were a surreal exercise in duplicity. I was living in the same house as my enemies, my face a placid mask of acceptance, my heart a coiled spring of anticipation. I watched them address invitations, their hands moving with a joyful purpose, unaware that they were planning a celebration on a foundation that was about to be ripped out from under them. The offer on the house came from a young doctor and his family, a full cash offer,
well over the asking price. They wanted to close quickly, a week before the wedding. The timing was almost poetic. The closing was a quiet, almost anticlimactic affair. I sat in Miss Abernathy's office, my best friend Monica by my side for moral support, and I signed the papers that transferred ownership of my home to a new family. As the cashier's check was slid across the table, I felt not a thrill of victory, but a profound grounding sense of peace. The war was over. I had won. Now all that was left was the final devastating act of a quiet, meticulously planned play. The wedding day arrived. A perfect sunny Saturday in October. I did not go to the church. I did not go to the reception. I spent the day with Monica, sitting in her quiet garden, drinking tea and talking about old times. But my mind was elsewhere. I was picturing the scene. Nancy in her white dress, Tyler in his tuxedo, both of them radiant, smiling, convinced that they had successfully shed their final burden. Our plan was designed for maximum impact. A 1-2 punch of legal and social humiliation. The first blow was to be delivered by a process server. We had timed it perfectly. He was to arrive at the reception, held at a fancy downtown hotel, just as the toasts were beginning. He would discreetly ask for Tyler and Nancy, and in front of their closest friends and family, he would serve them with the lawsuit Mr. Abernathy had prepared. It was a detailed, damning document, outlining the charges of financial exploitation, complete with copies of the bank statements showing their lavish spending of my money. The second blow was even more elegant in its cruelty. We had hired a second company, a mobile billboard truck. At the precise moment the lawsuit was being served inside, the truck would park directly in front of the hotel entrance. On its massive illuminated screen would be a single high-resolution photograph, the picture of me sitting alone at my dining table on Thanksgiving, the one I had taken months ago, and beneath it, in large simple letters would be the words, "They didn't want me at the wedding. Ask them why." The guests arriving late, the valets, anyone passing by would see it. It was a quiet public shaming, a story told in a single heartbreaking image. At 7:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Monica's nephew, whom we had paid to be a guest at the wedding, our spy on the inside. The text was short and glorious. "Server has made contact. Billboard is deployed. All hell is breaking loose." I imagined the scene, the clinking of champagne glasses silenced, the murmurs of confusion turning to gasps of horror, as the news spread through the ballroom. I imagined Nancy's perfect, smiling face, crumbling into a mask of disbelief. I imagined Tyler, his face ashen, trying to explain away the legal documents in his hand, while just outside my lonely, dignified face was lit up for the entire city to see. They had not wanted me at their wedding, but I had managed to become the main event. The fallout was immediate, spectacular, and utterly devastating for them. Monica's nephew provided a running commentary via text, a real-time account of their public implosion. The lawsuit served just as Tyler's best man stood to give a toast, sent a shockwave through the reception. The guests, initially confused, began to whisper as the contents of the legal documents were revealed. The story of their financial exploitation, their cruelty, spread through the ballroom like a virus. The mobile billboard parked out front was the nail in their social coffin. Guests leaving the reception were greeted by my sad, silent face, a giant illuminated question mark hanging over the entire celebration. Several older relatives, aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, left the wedding in disgust, calling Nancy and Tyler on their way out to express their shame and outrage. The wedding, their perfect day, had been irrevocably tainted. It was no longer a celebration of their love. It was a testament to their greed. Their honeymoon was cancelled. They had no money. The joint accounts were frozen, and the new credit cards they had taken out in anticipation of their future inheritance were now mountains of debt. They had no way to pay. The day after the wedding, they were hit with the final crushing blow. The new owners of the house, the ones who had legally taken possession a week prior, arrived with a court order and a sheriff's deputy to formally remove them. They were not just social pariahs, they were homeless. The life they had so carefully constructed, built on a foundation of my stolen assets and their own boundless cruelty, had been leveled in a single weekend. They were forced to move into a cheap extended stay motel, their designer clothes and minimalist furniture a sad, ironic reminder of the life they had lost. Their marriage, a union based on a shared ambition for a life they didn't want to work for, began to crumble under the weight of their spectacular failure. The blame game started immediately. Nancy blamed Tyler for not being able to handle me. Tyler blamed Nancy for being too greedy, for pushing too hard. Their partnership, forged in betrayal, was now dissolving in a cesspool of mutual recrimination. As for me, I watched it all from a safe, quiet distance. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a profound, hollowing relief, like a fever had finally broken. I had not sought revenge. I had sought justice, and justice, I had discovered, was a quiet, patient, and utterly devastating thing. My lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, handled the rest. The lawsuit was settled out of court. They had no choice but to agree to a repayment plan, a small amount garnished from their wages, every month for years to come. It was not about the money. It was about accountability. It was a constant, legal reminder of their betrayal. I had survived, and in doing so I had taken back, not just my money and my house, but my dignity, my peace, and my own name. I sit on my new balcony now, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and I watch the sun rise over Cincinnati. The air is cool and clean, and the quiet is a comforting blanket, not a suffocating shroud. My life is small and beautiful, curated not by my daughter's aesthetic, but by my own sense of peace. I bought a lovely, manageable condominium, in a quiet complex with a community garden, and a library. It is not the large house of my past, but it is a home, and every inch of it is mine. I have reconnected with my friends. Monica and I have our weekly bridge games again, and the laughter is a healing balm to my soul. I have found new purpose. I took a significant portion of the money from the sale of my house and the settlement from the lawsuit, and I worked with Mr. Abernathy to establish a foundation. We call it the Unwanted Fund, and it provides emergency grants and legal aid to elderly parents who are being exploited or displaced by their own families. My daughter's cruelest words have become my life's most meaningful words. I have not heard from Nancy or Tyler directly since their world imploded. I heard through the grapevine that they eventually divorced. Nancy apparently moved to Seattle to start over. Tyler is still in Cincinnati, working a menial job, living in a small, rundown apartment, a ghost of the successful man he so desperately wanted to be. A few months ago, I received a letter, forwarded from Monica. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. It was from Tyler. It was a long, rambling, self-pitying account of his hardships. His life was a mess. He was alone. He was struggling. It ended with a single stunning sentence. "After everything, I think you owe it to me to help." I read the letter, and then I did something the old Margaret would never have done. I laughed, a real, deep, genuine laugh. The sheer unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder Monica had given me as a housewarming gift, and I fed it into the machine. I watched as his words, his entitlement, his complete lack of self-awareness, were turned into a meaningless confetti of paper. My help, my love, my resources, they were no longer his to claim. I had found new places to invest my heart. I had found my story is not one of revenge. Not really. It is a story of reclamation. It is the story of a woman who was told